Thank you for the presentation this morning. I think the examples of the technology you showed are really inspiring because they align so well with how we actually learn. And given that this is a learning analytics conference, and I've been thinking a lot about it, I wanted your opinion on this. When it comes to information that goes on those dashboards, we're not thinking the same way as we're thinking about these embodied processes where people move and use tech and all that. So should we rethink how we present the analytics as well? Or in your view, that is actually not as important as embedding the tech artifacts into the way we engage with learning? Am I making my question?
No, so the sound is a bit echoey, that's all. But I think the question, if I'm right, is saying that we might, when we're designing the text for the chatbots, we need to be careful in thinking about how we design that to encourage learning and curiosity and not to take the agency away from the students. And you're saying at the Learning Analytics Conference, where there's much focus on the data as much as the information, is there a tendency for us to perhaps take away some of the agency from the students?
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm going to try to do this. Maybe this is better. I project my voice better without the...
That's much better, yeah.
The tools, the technology you presented allows for an embodied practice, right? You learn, you move, you see the different things, and it's not a computer that a person is using, but all these nice little gadgets that are embedded within the everyday classroom situation. Should the analytics be done in the same way? Because when you show the analytics, you still say, we brought the dashboard to the teacher, so then we default on this little tablet or a phone that we have with these conventional visualizations. Should we rethink and make the analytics bit, the feedback bit, also embodied?
I would say yes. I think I don't know enough myself about the analytics, the way in which the dashboards are being designed. I haven't really focused on that, but from what I've seen, they're quite canonical because of the way the software has been developed as to what's provided. So it might be percentage. I mean, you probably could tell me more about what's the current state of play for how analytics are presented back. But you may be just scanning it for looking for certain things. So when I look at a graph, is it going up or is it going down? Is the standard deviation too high or something? So we are primed to look for certain things in those data visualizations. And maybe we need to step back and just like we were doing with the Visi, was to get them to what look like even simple graphs, just some slight trend, what's causing that to go that rather than that. And maybe there needs to be some questioning about, and you probably know, how are these types of learning analytics used in situ, in context? Are they scanned and just look for key things that this is okay, this has been improving? I know at our university we have Tableau, and there's so many of these, and for people who aren't trained, they may be told the first thing to do is to look for certain key things. And maybe there needs to be a different way of presenting that data. And so yes is my short answer. I think it would be good, because we've too often relied on the software tools to give us the visualizations, and then for us to learn how to use them, when in fact we might actually be better thinking about new ways of representing the data. So I know with some of my students, when they use some of these data visualization tools, they come up with some really fancy graphs and box and 3D things and skanky thingies, graphs, and I say, well, why are you using that? What's that for? What are you presenting that? And it looks good. So our students don't necessarily know whether it's the right type of representation, the right type of visualization. So when it comes to actually interpreting them, again, so I don't know, what's your experience of?
Well, I don't know, but I also don't know whether that is something, just because it sounds like it would be meaningful to have dashboard that you can drag physically or modify or interact with. I don't actually know that we have evidence that suggests that that's useful.
But I asked you that question because you have these very interactive tools, but the dashboard is on. And I was wondering whether there was any support that or whether you've done anything on that. So that's the motivation for the question.
I think some of the teachers are quite envious that we focus on doing things for the kids to use, and sometimes it's an afterthought when they have to come up with ways of assessing students. But it's got more and more, I think, in universities and schools that they have to be able to assess students, and those are used in various ways in which they weren't before. So we do have to take it seriously, and there may be better ways of providing educationalists with more interactive visualizations. Yes, maybe that's the next thing to do.
Oh, there is a question from Aaron online. What are your thoughts on developing modeling learning with neurodiversity in mind?
That's not something I do myself. I have worked on various projects with people who've got specific disabilities, from ADHD to autism, and we have designed our learning tools with that in mind. But in terms of neurodiversity, I think that's a very broad term, and it can cover many things as to what that means. And I'm no expert in neurodiversity, but I do think it's become we've become more aware that every one of us is different in how we learn. And I think one of my colleagues is saying that we're all on the autism spectrum, but in terms of our attention may waver. Some are much more at that end of the autism spectrum. So it's not natural for us to, we have to be trained to learn how to sit for an hour in a classroom. And for some people it's much harder throughout at school and as they become teenagers. And then that goes into adulthood as well. So, and then we have now a way of increasing awareness that it isn't straightforward how we attend to each other or how sitting. So I think it's really important to think about neurodiversity in all its various forms and manifestations. But that I only have so much that I can do myself. But I do know some of my colleagues are starting to work in that area to try and understand a bit more. What does neurodiversity mean? What kind of support is helpful for them? And it's different for different types of diversity.
Cool, remember this, yeah. And then just a question, fantastic. When you're talking about the volunteer from the presentation, I really remember having this human-like character, the less human-like character. I wonder, from the lens perception-wise, like human-like analog character was better perceived versus less human-like, less animated character.
Sorry, I think if I can just repeat what you were saying, is there a difference between the human-like characters and the cartoon-like characters in terms of on the computer? Definitely. Okay. So I was talking to someone during the break about which one is preferred. There's a lot of research into whether that has an impact. And our study showed that it was quite nuanced. It wasn't, big differences between having a cartoon character or a realistic character. I think sometimes the cartoon characters, you may feel that it is just an AI tool. It's trying to sort of pretend in a way, but it's pretending. As it becomes more human-like, it could, as the person said over there, you get into the uncanny valley where you get a bit creeped out, but maybe that's good for learning. I know that scary teachers can be quite good at motivating, but it depends if you think that's a good thing. So then values come into play as to what do we think is your ideal teacher in this context, and why are you designing it like this? So having a chatbot, you're just having a conversation You don't know the personality, or it doesn't necessarily have one. But as soon as you put a face on it, it starts to have a personality, and you attribute, you can anthropomorphize, and we do that all the time. So, we've only just done 2 or 3 studies in that area, and I think it's ripe for more research as it becomes technically much easier and more lifelike to develop these types of avatars. And we don't even know in metaverse yet as to, as the avatars become more lifelike that. So one of my colleagues, years, Anthony Steed, and they found that having blocky type avatars, people sometimes prefer those to realistic ones, because you can start to infer and you know certain things, but you can then project onto those. So it very much depends on the context, and it's not always the case that we want something to be human-like, just because we can make it human-like.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jenny, and I'm from the University of Michigan. So I have a question about peer reviews. So many of the online MOOC classes, they do peer reviews because of the sheer size of the student body. And also there's a learning management system to support peer review, basically to help students, when they review others, they learn too by the process. So what is your opinion on maybe using the chatbot, using ChatGPT to replacing the peer review, or maybe use it as a help so that students can compare their own peer review versus the bot's peer review, and then compare back to comparison and hopefully help them learn too. Thanks.
It would be interesting to see. I don't know if anyone has done a study on that, but if you received feedback from a chatbot and you didn't think it was fair, you would say, well, that's the chatbot, it doesn't really know what it's talking about. Whereas when you receive feedback from a peer, I know that peers tend to be much more careful in how they give feedback, because they don't want to offend if they are identified as that person giving feedback. So in the Miro board, you couldn't tell who of the students was giving feedback, but at the same time you could read everyone's comments, the peers. And so they didn't put their names to identify who they were, but they were also very careful in the type of feedback. So you always want to have positive feedback and good feedback, and critical feedback can be tough to take. If it's from a chatbot, would you feel less offended or less upset than if it's from your professor? I don't know the answer to that. I think that requires some research. Do you think it would be the case that because it's... I know early research by Cliff Nass, Stanford, he looked at whether students would be more forgiving if the computer said, I'm sorry, after it made a mistake, and they found it did, but that was in the early days, back 40, 50 years ago. Now we're much more familiar with technology, and we have quite strong views and opinions. So if it was ChatGPT that was giving you feedback, you know that it may not be heartfelt, or it could be. So you might attribute quite different things to that than if it was from your professor or from your peers. And the question is, probably there would be differences, and that's for you to find out.
Final question for Simon?
Hi, Yvonne. Great to have you here. There's a lot of optimism about students engaging critically with ChatGPT, but I think there's a lot of optimism about that, and it's not necessarily founded. It's just an empirical question at the moment. I mean, you talked a lot about kids, but even undergrads and master's students may be just so impressed with its output, they're not even sure how they could improve on it. So I think there's a lot of scaffolding that's going to be needed to help students engage critically with it. And I just wondered whether you had any thoughts about that. Whatever level of student you want to pick. I mean, you're dealing a lot with master's level.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about tuition primaries.
I don't know is the answer, because I've only talked to the students that I do know from some of my friends, and their kids have been using it and find it, it's a very useful tool. But I think we need to do some systematic studies. It's very much anecdotal hearsay because it's only been around for a couple of months. And so I've got a couple of students lined up to do research looking at these sorts of questions. But again, the answer is I don't know. It would be presumptuous of me to say otherwise, other than there is going to be any new tool that comes out, like the smartphone, is probably the previous technology that came out that everyone just got really excited about, and has had profound effects on our relationship with the internet, with technology, and so on. But with this, I think very young kids will be starting to use it, and there are many of these sort of tools that have been spawned from the large language models that could be specifically designed for them, rather than at the moment they're being used sort of as search tools or putting a question in. And I think if we can design them to be more designed to be embedded in a certain task or activity, how would the children use them? So I know in other contexts, ChatGPT has been embedded into medical practice as one tool of several. Is it possible we can think about this being one tool that's embedded in other sorts of software tools that they're using online, rather than it just being by itself? So it's like, oh, we'll do that with this, and then we'll use the results of that to go with that. So I think the chaining of the different activities and how you might use it at certain points is maybe one way forward. And we need to think about what research can we do to show where would it be as something that they would go to at a particular point. So currently they're very good at learning how to use other software tools for a different context. So why not? This would be just one of another type, another tool to use.
Just go mindful of time. Depends on the maybe describe the mind.
I'll give a yes/no answer.
Yes, no, yes,
Well,
no.
it is on the line of what
was just said, but usually when we talk about ChatGPT and their limitations for writing, we think about the factual information, and it's like, yeah, ChatGPT cannot give factual information, so we try to get students to know the limitations, so they don't believe everything it says. But maybe a bigger disruption will be for the creative writing, because, for example, I remember when I was in school, elementary school, we had to write short poems, short stories, and that was to develop the creative writing aspects. And in that aspect, ChatGPT is really, really, really good. So how do you feel we can scaffold in that sense? Or, yeah, and I guess another question, do you think we should maybe guide the discussion there? We know the factual limitations for ChatGPT. We know that the way is the students don't believe everything it says, the Wikipedia at this time. But do you think maybe we should try to go more the how do you use it for creative writing, and don't use it for everything, or what it will be helpful?
I think there will be many more tools besides ChatGPT that will come out in the next 2 years, and we need to be tracking how what they're being designed for and how they could be used, not just focus on this one. And I think, yeah, absolutely. Let's think about all the areas. Let's have a revolution in education. Why should they be learning facts and knowledge and when it's just at their fingertips? And part of that, is to exercise the brain, to help you to think. So what is it that we want our students to be equipped with in the future? Is it to be able to write even more sophisticated poetry, or to critique poems that have been written? So I would like to see this as a stepping stone for us to rethink what the purpose of education is. That's a great one to end on, isn't it?
I think it's amazing. That's starting to change our relationship. When will we fly away?
When will I fly away?
How long will you be?
I thought you meant metaphysically. Friday.
Okay. So there's ample opportunities to go on.
Thank you very much, and a big applause again. Thank you.